Andrew from True Grit. What is up, my man? It has been a minute since you and I have talked and hung out. Last time was in Los Angeles, correct? When you were living here with me?
It was. Yeah. It was in Dan from DK&G's living room.
Right, right.
It's quite a while ago in Culver City.
Quite a while ago. Man, I have to tell you, it's been so impressive to see how True Grit has grown and scaled. And, you and I both know a handful of people that have got into selling digital assets. But I think what I would love to try to learn from you today, which I think is the best thing that most people could take away from you, is you've just been so aggressive on how you've run the business. Like, your website is very well thought out. Everything feels like it's in place. And just knowing you, and, we've hung out before when we were not doing interviews in LA. You just have a really great mindset on the customer experience, capturing the customer, making sure that they're engaged. Like, as a user of your products and somebody that has the full suite, like, you're constantly updating and innovating. So I just want to give you that compliment right out of the gate and give you a head start. That's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I mean, it's been like, I think a lot of people probably think, like it's been this overnight success, but it's kind of been like pretty slow and organic, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, it started out as, just a little way to maybe try to pay my studio rent. And then it just kind of grew from there. And it sort of afforded me the opportunity to not work directly with clients all the time. Like, I could kind of, I started picking and choosing the clients I wanted to work with because I had that supplemental income coming in. And then it just kind of grew from there to the point that I was like, you know what, I actually really like doing this a lot more than working for clients all the time. And
Sure.
I don't know, just like it's a bit more of a diverse set of skills required to run that kind of business. So it kind of, I don't know, it kind of gels with my introvert personality to a certain extent. But yeah, I take your point. It's nobody's been as surprised as me as to the success of the business, I guess. Like, that's probably, some classic Australian humbleness, but it's not what I set out to do. I didn't set out to, build some, world dominating graphic assets business, not that
Sure.
it is that, but it wasn't like I'm going to be an entrepreneur and start a side hustle that's going to, like, make me a billionaire. It just, I think with these things, letting things grow organically and making the sort of products that you would want to use is
Yep.
always the right way to start.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have sat back and were like, I'm going to do this and it's going to make me rich, bitch, you would have instantly been let down if it didn't take off
Totally.
in the first 3 months. But because your
Totally.
expectations were like, maybe I can make a little side rent off of this, or, then it becomes like, well, maybe now I can take one client out of the roster to now I can pick and choose. But it's not really a surprise to me that it's successful as it is, because obviously it helps that you're just a great designer outside of all of this. So you have the eye, the aesthetic, and it very much seems to me that you were making the tools that you wanted. That's a pretty fair guess, right?
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, it kind of started off the back of doing a Skillshare class. Skillshare approached me through my agent, Jackie Winter. And, I was kind of reluctant to even teach a class on texturing. And then I talked to Dan from DK&G and he was like, no, man, do it. You'll love it.
Yeah.
It's been one of the best things they ever did. And he really kind of talked me into it. And thanks, Dan. And from there, I got a lot of requests. Like, the class was a success, and a lot of students asked me, "Hey, why don't you kind of like maybe sell a few of your brushes or textures or whatever? I'd love to get access to them." And it just kind of made me think, oh, maybe I should do that. And I'd seen all of these other companies out there, and not all these other companies, but like, people on creative market just selling these really hacky brushes and textures
Yep.
and stuff like that. And it always kind of annoyed me that they were just kind of opportunists. I think they were the same kind of like, back then it was like they were like the crypto bros of the design world.
Yeah.
Um, just
Nailed it.
just jumping on whatever bandwagon they could jump on.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it was kind of like, I don't know if you'll get this reference from Curb Your Enthusiasm, but it was a spite store to begin with,
Yeah.
and I mean, that was part of it. It was just like, oh man, there's all these hacks out there building this garbage and they don't even work as illustrators. Like, I'll show them. And I didn't necessarily show them. It's harder than it looks, to make really good products that are going to be suitable to lots of different people. But yeah, that was kind of the genesis of it in a way. It was like one part like, oh, this would be a cool thing to do, and another part like, oh, there's got to be some better, like, I need to put some better product out in the world that actually has a little bit of, legitimacy behind it and is a bit more tried and tested.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what set you apart from the design crypto bros, and by the way, you nailed that because I remember what that marketplace looked like before you got on there. You know, you are a really good illustrator and designer. So you check that box. So then the next box is you were making the tools that you wanted, which was already at a top level of professionalism. Like you're not going to, like me, you're not going to work with some bullshit texture that people can see it repeat. And, if it breaks the illusion, then it's not an illusion, like you want it to feel organically old, organically beaten up, organically warm. But then, where I think that your success lies is that you also, probably because you're Australian, you have a very humble ego and you were able to bring in other artists. And I think one of the things that set you apart right out of the gate is your eye for curation, because so many of us do this job and instead of hating our peers, we're like inspired by them. We're motivated by them. Like the things that I've learned, we'll make this the Dan Culkin episode, but the things that I've learned about my own illustration style from how Dan from DKNG does his bizarro Rain Man illustration style, it's huge. And and you could have went in this and went alone and, I make all the brushes, I make all the textures, but instantly you started working with people that you thought that had a good vibe on the things that you wanted to be able to incorporate into your own artwork.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I mean, I think some of that probably comes from, my design background from back in the day is working in the snowboarding and skating industry. And, there's that business model is very much a collaborative process, even, down to pro model skateboards and stuff like that. So I always kind of had that in the back of my mind that, it'd be really cool to do essentially pro model brush sets, which we've done a few of. We've collaborated with people who we recently dropped a new action set with an artist from Adelaide, Australia, named Jake Foreman. And most of the time I'm building the product, but occasionally there's people we'll work with who are just so skilled at creating textures or brushes or actions or whatever that we'll kind of collaborate and do that. But I mean, even just collaborating with other artists on creating promo graphics and tutorials and stuff like that for me has been where a lot of the joy has come from. And like, I think being humble enough to know when know that you can't do everything,
Yep.
and that there's other people out there that can contribute a lot through collaboration. I mean, I can't recommend collaborating with other artists enough. Like, you learn so much.
Absolutely.
And it's so enjoyable as well, like passing files back and forth and, hey, you illustrate this part, I'm going to color this up. And like, I just love doing that stuff. And a lot of the time it's like, I've come to realize that I'm much better as a colorist and I guess like a visual effects kind of guy than I am as an illustrator. And I kind of like taking those raw, clean files and then, messing them up and adding that something at the end
Yeah.
that kind of makes it pop. So yeah.
I think too, we're at the edge of what I think is going to be an interesting emerging technology. Just past week, Apple announced the Apple Vision Pro. And it's one of those interesting moments where people are deciding, are they pro or against that? And, I kind of have the vision for the Apple Vision Pro is that our imaginations are limited to the full possibilities of what that device can do. And how I'm tying this into you is that you were very early to get on board with non-Adobe products. You were in the iPad space. You were with Procreate when it was brand new. Like, you've also been very open to saying, well, this isn't the face of illustration as we know it today, but who knows what it's going to be 3 months from now. And it's been interesting for me just to see there's been such a backlash to modern technology, whether it's AI or, what Apple just announced. And it's also from this sort of progressive generation that called everybody else boomers. And now they're dealing with their first disturbance in the force, and they don't seem to like it so much. And so I always sort of thought it was very cool that you didn't just lean on what the industry standard was. You were always looking to see what maybe the next industry standard could be.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't somewhat resistant to some of these iPad apps and emergent competitors to Adobe at first, mainly because the quality just wasn't there. Like when Procreate first came out, it seemed like a little bit of a toy to a certain extent, and it was difficult to see how professional illustrators were going to use it initially. And then as it progressed, it was like, okay, I'm seeing this at the point now that this is really useful for our customers, and it would be crazy not to start opening at least some of our brush sets up to be used in Procreate. So and I've met the team from Procreate since. They're based in Hobart, Tasmania. They have no intention of moving to Silicon Valley or anything like that. They're just like dominating that space from Australia's smallest city.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Like they've just done such an incredible job, and it's really opened my products up to a whole new market of people that wouldn't have necessarily used them otherwise, which I think is just a lesson in, maybe being open to emerging technologies. I don't know if I'm going to be that open to like AI, but in terms of like applications and different ways of creating with your hands, I think like you have to be open to that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that with everything that's changing, we all have an ability to kind of figure out how we harness that power and how we use it. And that's a choose your own adventure. But it's just been interesting to me to see suddenly now there's been a bit of a backlash on things. And I just say, keep moving forward, because society never goes the other way. Once something new's there, it just kind of keeps growing. And I love that you were in that scene, because I remember when I first used Procreate, honestly, the first time I used it as a coloring book. Like, I put my line artwork that I had done in Photoshop, and it was a cool way to get work done on my iPad, so that it didn't have to be at this desk the whole time. But I was literally just coloring and filling in like underneath my illustration work. And now the iPad, there's like an iPad art style. When I look out into the world, it's almost like you can recognize things that if you have a savvy eye, you can recognize pieces. You're like, that Walt Disney Imagineer did that concept art on an iPad. Like, you can just recognize the iPad look if you know what you're looking for. And I think sometimes I even see things I'm like, I'm pretty sure that that's Andrew's like paper texture that I'm seeing in there, because I love all the things that you did to make the digital world look like it has those pores, like the ink has been absorbed into the space, and that doesn't happen in the digital world. I love that you went an extra mile to even figure out kind of what the background of this stuff looks like. So it's a real 360 experience of like design immersion.
I mean, I think that's sort of over time become a pretty big focus of what we do in trying to replicate analog media in for the iPad and for Photoshop and for Clip Studio Paint. It's digital art for so long has really lacked that warmth, and it's not. I think there's maybe there's been a backlash, over the years to it kind of comes and goes as a trend, this idea of like making digital media look like analog media. But look, that's how I like to work.
Yeah.
I've always wanted that warmth in my work. I've wanted things to feel old and distressed and tactile. And I think, given that so much of our creative output lives online now, I mean, very little gets printed. It's nice to have that in your repertoire.
And I think what that look does is I think that it adds familiarity and nostalgia to new things.
Yeah.
Like when you see artwork that just looks a little bit more warm, that's how I always describe the distress or this sort of deteriorated look. It just feels warm. It feels like it really exists. And to me, it's just nostalgia. Like I was at Lincoln 2 weeks ago and I was walking by one of the illustrators' monitors and just like seeing him illustrate in the same style as like old Marvel comics, I just instantly walked by and just got that like, oh, I love that look. And
yeah.
I think these tools help us get to those desired looks faster. And yeah, there sometimes is a bizarre sort of pushback on shortcuts, but like when did being efficient or doing things the easy way somehow become the evil way? I'll never quite understand that mindset. But you and I come from the world of punk rock, and that just comes with it, right? There's always somebody being like, hey man, you can't skateboard like that, or your band can't get signed like that's just part of being an outsider, right? There's always somebody telling you that you're not outsider enough. So have you had companies sort of approach you to do like proprietary packages and kits and stuff like that for them, or is everybody just very cool to work with all the same tools?
Yeah, we actually, I can say this now because we'll be working on a blog post for this soon, but we recently created a proprietary set of brushes for MailChimp to be used in-house and for their marketing team. They have a whole team of illustrators. They have a team of freelance illustrators, and they just wanted to be able to unify the creative output by everybody using the same brush set. And it's honestly one of the most fun things I worked on. James, who is I believe he's the, not sure if he's creative director or he's certainly like the lead illustrator at MailChimp, but he really drove it and he approached me. He was already like a big fan of the brushes, and it was so fun to work on. I mean, there's not much more I can say to that, but I'd love to do more of that. It's difficult because, it's very time consuming making a brush set. There's a lot of testing, a lot of going back and forth. So, doing a custom brush set, for a small studio, the budget is probably out of their reach. It's unfortunately, it's probably something that's limited to, larger tech companies like MailChimp or Meta or Dropbox or whoever. So, but I'd love to do more of it. I've done a few little custom brushes for sort of VIP customers and stuff before where they've wanted to achieve a certain thing, and we've got a brush that's almost there and I make some changes to it and kind of help them out. So I kind of like doing stuff like that. It's kind of like, Andrew's help desk sometimes.
It's interesting though, because as a business owner, you have to really put pen to paper. Like, well, if I do this for company X, Y, and Z and I sell it to them one time, but if I put it on my website, I can sell it 1 million times over, like it doesn't go out of date until I pull the website down. So I mean, that's it makes sense why that would be a top tier luxury, because, they got to make that very worth your while, because, you're very much in the zone of it's not fully passive income because I know that you put a lot of work into your website and you're very aggressive with like retargeting and emailing people and constantly updating. But there is the mindset that you make this once and then you can sell it an unlimited amount of times, just kind of the real sweet spot to be in for selling a digital good.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and there's the opportunity cost as well, right? So,
Yeah.
like a custom brush set, you might work on it for 3 weeks to a month. Maybe not full time, but
Right.
it's kind of that. You've got so many hours in a day to work on product development. You're going to do that for a month working on a single brush set, and depending on how big it is. And while you're doing that, you're not working on another product that is designed for the masses, where you might sell, as you say, an unlimited number of them. So yeah, it's kind of like it's a bit of a balancing act with taking on those special projects like that. But yeah, I mean, I was just so pumped to work on that.
That's
It
cool.
was awesome. And the creative work that's being done with MailChimp is just fantastic. It's so unique, and the tone of voice that comes through the illustration is just it's so great. I really love it.
I mean, it sounds like to me a big win too is just like for you, just doing something different, collaborating, working with people
Totally.
you
Yeah.
respect, like that just puts more stoke back into everything else that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's like it's nice from an ego point of view. It's nice
Yeah.
to be asked. It's
Yeah.
nice for a big company like that to want to put their trust in you. I think it's not dissimilar to a type foundry who, American Airlines approaches them and says, "Hey, we need a new corporate font. You guys, would love to work with you." So I think it's if nothing else, it's nice to be asked. It's nice to be on the radar
Yeah.
of companies like that, and them be able to place their trust in you you know to be able to approach the people who approve budgets for this and be like, no, 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 these guys are legit. Like they'll do a good job of this for us. So
This is money well spent. We should approve this invoice. I'm going to give you a free idea. Are you ready for this?
yeah.
Limited edition digital brushes.
Yeah,
Huh?
I've thought of that. I've thought of that.
It's kind of
We
crazy.
kind of got something in the works, maybe for Black Friday this year,
Oh,
like a
that's
limited edition
amazing.
bundle. That
That's
it's and,
amazing.
and we did do one. We did a Black Lives Matter fundraiser brush set
Oh, that's
called
cool.
Letters of Protest,
Yeah.
and that was it was for a limited time only. It's not available anymore. We raised, I think, like $40,000
Wow,
US,
that's
maybe even
awesome.
more, for the Movement for Black Lives organization. They sort of take donations and distribute them to the organizations most in need at any given moment.
Yeah.
So I'm super proud of that, and I think that was a really good way to do a limited edition product where it's just not going to be available forever. We want to really help raise some funds, but there has to be a sense of urgency around it because the money was needed,
Yeah.
right there and then.
And that's also cool for you too because it gives you a way to donate, but pinpoint like this bucket of money goes to these people and we're running it from this date to like it's good housekeeping too on how
Yeah.
you actually run the promotion, how you donate the money. Like that's super smart. So when you are on multiple platforms like you are, you come up with a brush, like you figure out like this is something that the market needs. What's it look like for you on the back end to be able to take that and to get it to work in Photoshop, Illustrator, Procreate? Like how much work is it for you to make sure that all your customers can use it on their chosen platforms?
I mean, the process for me, and I think, other brush makers are probably different, but because I'm multi-platform and I'm a Photoshop guy, I always start on Photoshop first.
Okay.
So I'll develop all of the brushes in Photoshop. It's kind of the best way to, you know, for me, it's the most efficient way to repeat assets, create brush tips, create the embedded textures, all of that sort of stuff. I can test it on, I mean, this thing right here, this is the screen that we're talking on. That's a Wacom Cintiq Pro. So it's a, 4K drawing display. And then I'm also testing on, a really low res, old school, like a God, 15-year-old Wacom Intuos for, it's like
Yeah.
barely sensitive at all, but you have to assume that you've got, people with different budgets for their equipment. So, once they work across those different devices, I basically lock it in Photoshop and then start exporting all the assets out, and rebuild them individually in each brush engine. And they all work differently. They all behave differently. It's, Procreate, you can import Photoshop brushes and use them as a starting point, but if they're, in any way anything more complex than a stamp brush, it doesn't
Yeah.
really work. You just kind of got to start from scratch. So yeah, it's a lot of work. It's, I've been heckled online before, like in Instagram posts or Instagram ads in particular, when we call out the number of hours that go into building a brush set, like hundreds and hundreds of hours. And, there's always some smart ass with a, American Eagle avatar and, an
Yeah.
anonymous Instagram handle who
Oh, I
loves
know
to
the
tell me
type.
that they could do it in 3 minutes. But
Yeah.
man, it really, to do it well, it does take a long time. So, yeah, it's a process. Like, if I could duplicate myself 3 times, we could release 10 brush sets a year. But, realistically, we kind of, 3 years pretty reasonable. It's kind of 3 to 4 is 3 to 4 really good, unique and usable sets is what I aim for per year.
Per year. Wow.
Because of that, just that being multi-platform, it just, it really slows things down. When you're building out a set of tutorials, for example, you're doing tutorials for 3, 4, 5 apps sometimes.
Yeah.
Infinite Pulp, paper textures, that's 5 different apps, including Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer.
Wow.
So it's a lot of work.
Well, I mean, you should hire American Eagle Avatar guy because he can get it done in 3 minutes. So
Totally, yeah,
hell
yeah,
with
man.
three of you. We need three of him.
Yeah, he's killing it.
He's absolutely crushing it. So you're really good at sending out updates and giving people the email like, hey, you have this product that needs to be updated. What motivates you? Like when, first off, most businesses just want to keep making new products. And, when you look at like automobiles, for example, it's like, I'm sure Tesla's like, oh, we really have to update this damn thing. Like we want to just keep building the next new thing. So for you, it's not like if a brush is not performing as best as it could, that somebody's life is in danger, but it matters to you. And I always find it impressive when I get those emails. So like, one, how do you work that into your workflow? And when do you get to a tipping point where like that one needs an update?
I think sometimes it's just as, new features become available within various apps, definitely updated brushes multiple times off the back of advances in Procreate, or advances in Clip Studio. I think like a lot of it is just, what would I want? If I paid for these, what would I expect?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's good enough to just make it once and be like, oh, well, Adobe updated 4 years ago and that's it now. We're done here.
Yeah.
It's too hard or whatever. Or, through talking to customers, you figure out like, oh, we can actually improve these by organizing them better, renaming them, unifying something in some way. There's some products that started off as Photoshop only, and then we added Procreate, and then we added Affinity, and so on and so forth. And in between those stages, there's just little differences across those 4 different platforms. So eventually you'll kind of stand back and go, hang on, this is a shit show. Like the guy who's using who started out using these in Photoshop. He's like jumping back and forth between that and Procreate now, and the brushes don't quite match up, or the names are a little bit different, or whatever. Let's like, now that the brush engines work more similarly, let's like unify them and just rebuild everything for all four apps, which is something we did last year with our beat tones, like halftone brush set.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which was sort of, the most popular brush set I'd ever made, for a really long time. It was one of the, I think, actually launched the company with that, and it was a big hit. But yeah, it just had so many upgrades and add-ons over the years that it was time to just rebuild them from scratch and unify them and start again.
Yeah, it's where it's interesting where your company's like half tech company, half art company, because, as we look at how tech evolves, it evolves a lot of times from the response that it gets from its customers. Like going back to talking about Apple, when they released the very first Apple Watch, it was like not even Apple Watch 1, it was like Apple Watch 0. And they knew the early adapters and the first wave of programmers would sort of inform them where that product was going to go. And so it only makes sense that, you think what other illustrators want and you put it out there. But for me, being like a seasoned silkscreen artist, when you talk to other silkscreen printers, it's just like, it's the little inches of information you get from your peers. You're like, why did I never think of doing it that way? So it's being the business owner, and you have a guy be like, hey man, I don't know if you ever known this, but I take your brushes and I do X, Y, and Z. And you're like, absolutely brilliant. This guy has absolutely nailed a better organizational system or a better way to put these things together. So it would make sense that like a tech company, you would learn from your customers, but because you are a digital company, you can pivot and improve and keep going along with that product's life cycle.
Yeah, totally.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and it's like customers are so often the driving force behind making changes and just realizing like how different products get used. I mean, the way that, we promote a product in some of the promotional materials and demonstrate how a particular brush set can be used or whatever, is not always how they end up being used. They're kind of like my ideal use case. But, case in point, there's an artist named Max Loeffler. He's an illustrator from Germany. He does a lot of gig posters and sort of music industry stuff, a lot of editorial. And he has this kind of like grainy, sort of surreal airbrush style, but he uses our halftone zine machine image processing template to kind of like separate his airbrushing out into different colors. And it's just like such a crazy way of working, but it just works for him, and it's allowed him to create this really unique look. And I just never would have expected that. And I see that stuff all the time, just like people just doing stuff. You're like, man, what made you think of doing that?
Yeah.
So it's cool. Yeah, I love being surprised like that.
Yeah, the innovation of fellow creatives that, have the exact same tools that you and I have, and they just come up with this wild idea. It's like, I always make the joke that Photoshop's like the human brain. Like everybody uses 5% of it different than everybody else.
Yeah.
Because it's like nobody knows what everything in Photoshop does, even people at Adobe, right? Like it does so much shit. It'd be impossible to know everything that it does or that it's capable of. Speaking of innovation, I would have to say that, once digital illustration was created, probably the thing that has changed it the most has got to be pressure sensitivity, right? Like that's got to be the biggest innovation other than just inventing illustration, was adding in that pressure sensitivity, which I'm sure is a big part of your learning curve when you're making new brushes and tools.
Yeah, I think particularly just access to affordable drawing displays, and the iPad's probably, the biggest force behind that. But it's just, I remember myself when I first got like a Wacom Cintiq drawing display, it was just like, oh my God, what have I been doing? This is the biggest game changer imaginable. And, now that is available to, at a really, in a really affordable way to most illustrators. I mean, iPad, look, they're not cheap, but it's, the bang for buck is incredible. And you've got another device you can watch Netflix on and do stuff like that as well. So,
Yeah.
it's that has completely changed the industry. I know the tattoo industry has been completely transformed by Procreate and the iPad.
Oh, 100%. We were recording a podcast of the night, and our friend Gustavo Jaimes, who's a very popular tattoo artist here in Orange County, I was like, Tavo, if you had to tell me how many hours a day do you think you spend on your iPad? He's like, easily 6 hours a day, just in there illustrating, and that's become the hub for all that. And I remember when I got the iPad Pro, which was the first one that you could draw on, like there just wasn't any software there. So when AstroPad came out and you could have like kind of a version of Photoshop over it, it just felt like this isn't perfect, but I can see the future. I can see where all this is going. And it just feels amazing that, with a strong Wi-Fi connection, I can be in the living room watching TV, coloring in illustrations for a computer that's sitting back in my office on that Photoshop file, It felt amazing. So I know that one of the things that you've done, I think really well, is you focus on customer experience. You don't just like have a website and like, oh, somebody bought something. It seems to me that you do a lot of customer maintenance, like following your customers, like looking at empty shopping carts and all that kind of stuff. Is that stuff that you figured out on your own, or did you bring in like a retargeting guy or something like that? Or is it just literally like, I have this website, I want it to be as badass as possible, I have a passion for it, I'm going to go watch YouTube videos and read Reddit forums until I figure out how to do it myself?
There's a little bit of that. I mean, a lot of it I just kind of learned organically. I studied marketing at university, so I'm kind of from that background a little bit anyway.
Okay,
that
makes sense.
Sort of in a different life. I did business and marketing, and then realized I kind of hated it once I graduated, and went back into design and illustration, which was sort of what I'd intended to do originally. But so I guess I kind of understand that world a little bit, but I mean, since I studied, the world changed with, everything went from bricks and mortar to e-commerce anyway. And, my store runs on Shopify. Shopify are, really, really good at educating and providing the resources for their subscribers to build their businesses along the way through different functionalities that exist in the system. So, for example, like sending automated reminder emails to people who abandoned their cart in case, they did want to, still continue with their purchase or whatever. So, yeah, I think like, the way my website runs now compared to when I first started, it's a complete custom build. Now, but I started out with just, a basic template, made some customizations. I'd done a lot of web design and UX myself when I was working in agencies, so that was pretty helpful. But I think like you just kind of learn along the way. You choose to work with the right people. I work with a digital marketing agency in Los Angeles, and they handle a lot of my, social advertising and, even ad creative. So, recognizing what you don't know is probably more important than recognizing what you do. A lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, having an ad company is huge because, I mean, those folks are just so dialed in to all the A/B testing that needs to be done. And really, they look at it all day. So they understand it outside of what your needs are. They just understand trends. So we look at advertising as very personal because, well, I'm spending $100 a day, or in your case, $1,000 a day or whatever it is. I expect to get this back. And they can look at it from a very scientific way instead of a personal way. But I think the thing that I just learned from you that's amazing is that you're a Shopify customer and you just decided, hey, they send these emails out to their customers. maybe I should read them and click on them and learn a couple of things about their platform. Because every time
Yep.
Squarespace emails me, I'm like, I ain't got time for this shit. I just delete it. So maybe I should start reading those emails.
Yeah, they're really on a tear at the moment with developing new products for retailers as well. It's yeah, like some of the features that they're starting to build in, it is just so, I wouldn't say complex, but there's just so many really high-end features that are available now, and really all you have to do is learn how to use them. And the resources that they provide are really good. And I think that was kind of like a little bit of a lesson for me too in handling my own customer service is
Yeah.
like give people the info and let them solve things for themselves first. And not everybody will want to do that. They're always going to want to email and ask a question that was like right in front of their eyes. But um, it, that's how I like to work, like with Shopify. I don't want to get on the phone with them or message them. I just want to look up on their blog, like, how the hell do I do this?
Yeah.
And it works. So, we've really spent a lot of time building up a knowledge base. We built a completely different customer service portal that runs on Zendesk. And it kind of allows us to like really track customer support tickets really well. So it's been probably one of the best things we've ever done. I think it's at a certain point you just in the age of Amazon, you have to do that anyway. You have to
Sure.
support your customers in a somewhat professional manner. You can't just sort of send some garbled email to people
Right.
saying, "Oh, just restart Photoshop. It'll be fine, man."
Well, especially with the world being so small with the internet, is that if you're giving out bad customer service, that's going to follow around all of your ads, all your social posts. So it's like we all have
Yep.
to keep a clean shop, where people are going to be like, "Hey, this guy does this," and then it just looks bad. But I know that, like, I think the last time that you and I hung out was maybe 2019, and back then you were already giving me like a lowdown on what you were spending on advertising and how aggressive you were, and like how you were going after things. And I was so impressed. I'm like, man, this guy really is in it to win it. And you were one of the first people I knew that was going that hard in the social media advertising, and not just posting and going like, I don't know why Instagram doesn't show anybody my shit. Like, you were already like way above most folks I know on getting aggressive in that space. And it looks like with the way that the company scaled, that was a solid investment for you.
Yeah, yeah, it was. And I mean, it wasn't through like, I'm not one of those people that like listens to side hustle podcasts and stuff like that. I just like, you know, Gary Vee can eat a dick as far as I'm concerned. I don't really, I'm just not into, I find that hustle culture really gross. But yeah, I mean, I was actually one of my interns from, back when I had my studio in Sydney. He moved to New York and started his own digital agency, and they had some really high profile clients. And he recommended that I work with the agents I work with. They're called Biddyco. They're out of Culver City in LA. And they some of their clients have been working with them, and I was just completely clueless about digital advertising, but I kind of knew that I didn't have the skill set to do it. The systems for running and placing and targeting ads now are just so complex. And I also knew that, like leveraging paid traffic, if done right, was just the way to go. You can, as you say, you can't just like bitch about the algorithm. If you want people to see your product, you pay to get eyeballs on it. It's a story as old as commerce.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of one of the best things I did. I went into, I was really clueless as to how it worked, or how it even financially how it worked. It was a scary investment to make, but it's really paid off. And it just, I was always a little bit worried about, I just don't want to be that company that's out there like bashing people over the head with your message. It's sort of been a big thing with working with an agency is making sure that we're not doing that. We're not creating clickbaity email content, or these awful hey, we're your best friend email funnels and stuff
Right,
like that.
right.
It's sort of trying to be the most authentic brand we can be while also getting our message out there. I guess like ethical marketing, for lack of a better term, like just putting the product in front of people. Hey, if you want it, you want it. If you don't, you don't. That's totally fine.
I
Not trying to ram it down people's throats so much.
Yeah, I agree with that mindset because I mean, I operated under the idea that if you give people something that they really enjoy, they'll instinctively figure out how to find more of it. And if you constantly bombard people with stuff that they don't want to hear, they'll inevitably find a way to ignore it. So I always feel like getting somebody's ear is getting their trust. And if you can build that trust, then that person will go where you go. But it is weird because clickbait works, like
I know this is the thing. Yeah.
it works very fucking well. Like,
Yeah.
I've gone on a very deep dive on YouTube with my career, and it's almost like if you can find the most negative way to tell a positive story, that works, and
Yep.
it sucks, but it's like, do you want to make a really good video that nobody watches? Because if nobody clicks, it doesn't care how good the video is. So marketing ethically is very, very hard if you just don't want to because like you and I both know the easiest way to get clicks, but you'd feel like a trash person if you did it.
Totally. Yeah. It's just, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example.
Please.
So we have this ad for our chromograph pencil brushes.
Mm-hmm.
And within that set of brushes, they're like very much traditional media pencils, pastels, charcoals. That's what they're designed to do. Just recreate that aesthetic very authentically. But then within the set, there's about 5 or 6 brushes that are just a shortcut for doing a fill. So say you're a comic penciler, you don't want to be like, to indicate your shadows, you don't want to be like penciling that for 3 minutes when you could take one brush and just fill that area really, really quickly. So we've got this ad that demonstrates that product, and oh my god, the hateful comments that it gets, that we are like destroying art by creating a cheat code so that now anyone can like do something in 5 seconds that American Avatar guy spent years learning to do by hand. And it's just like, man, it that ad as a result performs incredibly well because it creates controversy, it creates comments, it creates these arguments back and forth between my customers defending digital art and its shortcuts and traditional artists who weren't even the target audience for this product in the first place,
chiming in,
misunderstanding what it does and why it does it,
yeah,
and just getting their panties in a twist via anonymous comments on Instagram. It's absolutely wild to witness. But
yeah,
it's kind of like, part of me is like, well, you keep going with that hate, man. You think you're hurting me, but you're really not. You're boosting the visibility of this content immeasurably.
yeah.
And I know I could weaponize that by making 10 ads like it. I have zero interest in doing that. I think it's a bad vibe. I don't want to be out there Fox Newsing my content, right? But there's plenty of people out there who are totally happy to do that, to create controversy and, elicit an outraged response to things in order to convert that to, dollars, clicks, asses on seats.
I mean, it works, I use a couple of these different, programs where essentially they try to help you optimize your YouTube channel. So you put up a video and you can tell it like, hey, this is what the video is about. And now they have these AI tools that sort of try to help you come up with a title for the video. And all the AI is doing is trying to find the most sensational way. If you're like, best hot dog I ever ate, the AI will be like 9 things to never buy. You know what I mean? Because it's like it's
Yeah.
trying to like figure out, because it knows, the metrics of what people click on. You said something that I really love. You said, I went to school for, business and marketing, so that in my background, but I didn't like doing it. But that was a fucking lie, because you're so good at doing it for yourself. Like, it'd be hard for me to say whether I think you're a better illustrator or a better, business or marketing person, because you're so good at both. And I love the idea that you went to school for this thing, you did it professionally for others, and you fucking hated doing it for them, but you're so good at doing it for yourself. And I've always been very appreciative of how you keep a real fine balance of all the tools you sell, the look of your website, it's dialed in. But so is also the business aspect of it, the marketing aspect of it. Like, you're a very, very well balanced dude. And when I look at people like myself, my scale is so lopsided. It's all focused on making content. Managing it, I do a horrible job. Most people are like, illustrate, print, make the thing that I love, and let all of the rest of it fall apart. But Andrew, you have to be one of the most balanced creatives that I know. And I know a lot.
I don't know if I agree with you there, but
nobody would see themselves that way, but I can see you that way, man.
Yeah. I think I do a few things acceptably. Let's say that. Master of nothing, but pretty damn good at a few, I think is maybe the way I look at it. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a very insightful comment that I didn't like doing it for other people, but I like doing it for myself. And that's spot on.
Yeah.
And I sort of neglect to acknowledge that sometimes. But yeah, I really didn't like doing sales and marketing for, in the snowboard travel industry, which was, my first job. I hated it.
Yeah.
But I do like figuring out marketing and promotion and just making a website work and figuring out how to do a little bit of liquid coding and, like just all the weird little skills that are really helpful to have in running an e-commerce business. I do enjoy doing that for myself. It's like, it's just creative problem solving a lot of the time, but it's creative problem solving without a client. There's nobody else to criticize you but yourself. There's no email coming with 15 people CC'd on it who are going to critique your work or whatever. It's just like, this is the problem. How can I solve it? And a lot of the time for me, it's like, how can I solve it with a minimum of fuss without needing to turn it into, some huge project? So
when, as illustrators, you do an illustration, you post it and people compliment it. The dopamine comes back to you. Or you send it to your client. They're like, oh my God, this looks so good. Thank you so much. That's where the dopamine comes in. So with your love for marketing and like optimizing your website, do you just get stat boners? Do you just like go and look at the back and you're like, the CTR is up to 7.5%? Like, cause like once I started to understand how the YouTube stats work, I got major stat boners all the time. I would just love to go back there and be like, hey man, that worked. That literally got 3.5% more on like CTR, or watch time is up to 65%. And like just following all that stuff, it's a fun video game to play if you get your mind into what tools you're looking for.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I do. For sure I do that. I mean, I don't focus too much on a lot of like people, and this comes back to that whole hustle culture and, excessive sort of clickbaity marketing. I try to avoid all of that stuff on my website, and, probably to my detriment, I could supercharge that website so much more by having, all these BS pop-up prompts and add this now, 15 people have this in their checkout. This is the most popular product. Like all of those sort of awful features that you see in a lot of e-commerce sites. I could definitely integrate that into my site, but I just kind of choose not to. I tend to focus a little bit too much on aesthetics? Does it feel good? Does it present the product visually in a way that's really easy to digest and that sort of inspires people to maybe try something new? Um, I mean, for me, I think the ultimate sort of outcome comes from seeing some of the reviews that come in and getting
Yeah.
feedback from customers, much more than like, oh, we have, average order value is up 2% this month or whatever. I think like just getting those reviews back from people who say, hey, trying this product totally changed the game for me. Like there's literally nothing better I could ask for.
Yeah.
Obviously I want to be able to, pay my rent and all of that sort of stuff with this, but I think as what like drives me to keep going on, or at least makes me feel good about what I do. It's the young illustrators who are finding their feet in their career and finding their voice when they email or write a review that sort of says, it kind of helped them find a more cohesive aesthetic within their work, then, that's kind of job done for me.
Yeah. I think that it's important to find where your happiness is at in your project. Like I like looking at stats because, like you and everybody else, I want to work hard. I love working hard. I just want to know that the work is paying off.
Yes.
And
Yep.
so many of us with these jobs that, we own our own ship and we do our own thing. It's very gray. Like, where should my energy go? Like you said earlier, we've only so many hours in the day, and I want to make sure that I get that return on my, my manpower investment. So absolutely, man. Like the numbers and stuff are fun to see if the tweaks are working, but the comments, seeing people use the product, seeing the enjoyment that it brings people, that for sure is always the best part in any business that's ran off of people. And news alert, almost all businesses are run off of people. Like that's what the end game is. Andrew, this was so much fun picking your brain. I cannot wait to see you at Into the Woods, hang out in the real life again for the first time in 4 years.
I know it's been a while.
And I'm excited to see your workshop, man. Like I do believe you just got so much to teach people. I didn't want this episode to be like a hard sell. I just knew that telling your story and introducing people to your mind, as I know it as somebody outside of these interviews, somebody who's been lucky enough to hang out with, I'm like, I'll just show them who Andrew is. And I'll be like, this is a guy that I want to do a workshop with. So thank you so much for this conversation, man. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Always good to talk to you.
You too, buddy. I'll see you soon at Into the Woods.